My name is Wambui, Njuguna. I work with ANPPCAN. ANPPCAN stands for the African Network for Prevention and Protection Against Child Abuse and Neglect. And we are based, the headquarters of ANPPCAN is in Nairobi. And ANPPCAN has got 26 chapters in Africa. It's purely an African-based NGO.
So it was started because there's a big problem? Or?
Yes, ANPPCAN was started in 1986 because by people who are mainly doing studies, many of them actually academicians. They were doing studies on child labor, and then they would go to share with other networks and other groups. And then it was realized that Africa was talking about child labor. Other continents like the West, developed US, Europe, they were talking about sexual abuse of children. And you can imagine that was early 82, 83, 84. And people are now you can see they were at very different levels. One was talking about child labor, which stopped long time ago in those countries. And they were talking about sexual abuse, and Africa was asking, can people do that to their children? So it was recommended that there be a network where this kind of knowledge and information could be shared on the continent. And that is how ANPPCAN was started.
So ANPPCAN was started even before the problem of sexual violence?
I wouldn't say it was not there. It was minute, it was not recognized, and maybe it was there and was not being reported as much, because if you go back in history, you still hear some cases of sexual abuse. It's not like sexual abuse is a very totally new thing to us, but then it wasn't to that magnitude. But child labor was the big thing at that time. People were beginning to realize that children are working and it is affecting their health and development, and therefore beginning to say, why should our children be working, and looking at the factors that were making children work, the factors that were making them not to go to school, while if they were in school, they would be out of child labor situations.
Today, how is the situation being identified? Have you realized the problem is very big?
On child labor, generally, or the problems of children, I think one thing that happened, and I would say maybe in the last, from mid-90s, in 1994, for example, ANPPCAN did a study on awareness levels of child abuse and neglect in this country, in Kenya. And what came out clearly was that people didn't know. When you talked about child abuse, even professionals didn't see some things as child abuse. Things like beating children, corporal punishment. Teachers didn't see anything wrong with it. And if you talked about things like FGM, communities and families actually who practice it didn't see it as a problem, because they said, we don't do it because we hate our children. In fact, we do it because we care, because our community does this. So if my child does not go through it, where is this child going to live? So that was the argument. Then there was a big campaign, especially in this country, from 1995, 96. For about 6 years, we had a huge campaign talking about child abuse and neglect, telling people what it does to children, telling people that once it happens, there is possibility of the same people becoming abusers, and telling people where they should go to report cases of abuse when it happens. So you see, then people became aware. So people started reporting. So then cases then became evident. So it is, when you now compare that on child labor, sexual abuse, physical abuse, people now talk about it. People debate about it. People ask what are the alternatives, for example, against, what are the alternatives to corporal punishment? When you tell teachers not to beat children, what do? They ask us, what do? We don't beat them. Actually, they say they discipline them. So they ask, how else can we discipline a child? There are many alternatives, and in fact, even in the teaching curriculums, the alternatives are there. It's only that they take longer. And there are also other frustrations that different groups face. If you look at for example, when a teacher has to deal, take 6, 7, 8-year-olds, and the international recommendation, I think, is a class should be about 40 children. And we have had classes which are 80, 100, like what happened with the free primary education, and one teacher dealing with it. So then how is that teacher going to cope with 7-year-olds, 100 of them alone? So they have their own frustrations. Facilities also are a challenge, and therefore frustrations make people do certain things. But there are now programs which are addressing issues of alternatives to corporal punishment, also helping people to realize what it does to children, that it is actually a power issue. You beat another person only because you feel more powerful than them. It is never really a question, because if you don't think so, then you wouldn't go doing that. So there are many efforts now going on, but there's still a lot of work to be done, actually. There's still a lot of work to be done, because we need to deal with those other factors. If you look at the cases that we see in our media reporting, especially physical abuse of children, beating of children, and you look at sometimes the background of the parents who are doing that, the way they live, their economic conditions, the frustrations they are going through, you can see that sometimes it is never right to beat a child, but sometimes there are factors that make it worse. And therefore, even as we campaign for this not to happen, we should be looking at it holistically and saying, what else do we need to do so that people don't reach to the level where they need to beat children?
For instance, in a nutshell, what is really the mandate
of ANPPCAN? ANPPCAN's mandate, really, like we say, our vision is to see a continent where there is no child maltreatment. And our mission is to work with others to realize this. So we really work a lot with our other people, including our governments, to realize the rights of children and to protect them from violations. And we do a lot of research on different issues of children. Like I said, ANPPCAN was started from research being done on child labor. And because of the fact that we have offices or net chapters in 26 countries in Africa, we are advantaged in that we get a lot of information from different countries, which helps us to see what is the main issue affecting children on the continent. And from that, we organize forums. For example, we have organized forums on child trafficking. We have held 2 huge meetings, international meetings on child sexual abuse in Africa. We have addressed the issue of family-based care for children on the continent, because again, some things happen and others happen. So when there was, with the influx, or not influx, with the increase of orphans and vulnerable children due to HIV/AIDS, people then just started seeing as if the only way to help those children is to start institutions. And yet institutions are very bad for children, because then they affect children's development, their cognitive issues are not addressed. So we now saw that there is need to address that issue. So we tend to, when we get that information, we organize forums, we share information, and we also have got what we call, we organize, we have advocacy at very high level. We have worked, for example, with the African Union for very many years, where we worked with them to develop the African Charter on the rights and welfare of the child. We came back and they said the charter was still not in force. And in 1997, we organized another meeting, and we were given again the responsibility to work with other people and ensure that the charter came into force. And with the charter, then you have a mechanism, because it has a committee of experts to address issues on the continent. So we do research, we do lobbying and advocacy, we do a lot of capacity building. For example, in different countries, in Kenya included, we have developed curriculums working with early childhood teachers, with the police, to address issues of child rights and child protection. Purely because we recognize that it is an issue that you cannot deal with alone. You need other people because it has so many facets and issues.
Where is the project based and what is the objective?
This particular project is covering 7 countries. Like I said, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Ethiopia, Sudan, South Sudan. So it's actually the 4 East African countries. It's only Burundi that is not included. And then we have extended to Ethiopia, Sudan, and South Sudan. So it is purely, again, to look at how we improve the way we address issues of children. And again, this came out from our experiences in the field working on issues of children. And we realized that as we do, issues, you go on an issue of sexual, you deal with child labor, you deal with street children, we realize that systems to respond or to address issues of children were not well organized. And everywhere we believe that when you have systems, they live longer, they live beyond people, and therefore issues of sustainability are also better. And people then can look at the issues of children in a more holistic way and can be able to do more. If you take, for example, an issue of a child who is sexually abused, and you look at the way we deal with it in our countries in Africa, and you look at countries where there are systems to address, you see the difference. In a place like in the developed countries, there was a case, for example, recently of one, actually a Kenyan, whose child died. I think you must have seen it in the media in Australia. And you could see it was a child, they reported a child has died, it fell. And then you could see systems kind of being released. And within time, they could say, no, this child actually did not accidentally fall. From what we are seeing, there are issues of abuse. Within that time, they released the social welfare departments came in, because then there is another child. That means there is possibility of that other child getting into trouble. The police came. So you see different actors. You see a system responding. But in many cases, for us, a child gets abused. First of all, even for that child to get anything, it goes around very many places. And therefore, sometimes they get re-traumatized because they are telling the same story everywhere, and getting help may take much, much, much longer. And then the help is not holistic. The case may be taken to court, yes, and it may be dealt with in court, and the perpetrator may even be jailed. But who addresses the psychosocial needs of that child? How does that child continue with life? Who addresses that family? And who looks at beyond that one child to the other 3, 4, 5? In our situation, there could be even another 7 children in the same home. So that is what has triggered the thinking of national child protection systems. What are the laws? So it has pillars. We're looking at issues of laws and policies. We are looking at the human resources. What are the capacities of the people who are working in the children's sector, both in government and even in the civil society? Because when the capacity is not there, then the services that we provide will sometimes even cause more damage. So it also looks at the issue of coordination. Who is the driver when it comes to issues of children in the country? The institutions that are there, what is their skills? What skills do they have? How do they link up with others? So really that is the intention of the system's approach to child protection.